given you, chapter 8, chapter 60, verse 8, clarifies that point. Your question is addressed by that particular part. Why? Because even that verse is talking about conflict. It's talking about conflict.
Good. So now we're coming back to that. I think that was a really important verse. I think we went off that verse because we started discussing other reasons as well.
Let's read the verse again.
Good.
So we understand the context. It's actually talking about conflict. Okay. It's not talking about a standard normal situation.
Okay.
Allah forbids you not those who did not make war against you on account of religion and did not drive you out from your homes, that you should show them kindness and deal justly with them. Allah loves the just dealers. So it is clear that your understanding, as you're saying that people can misunderstand it that way, and people can be in perpetual warfare with Christians and Jews because of that verse. I'm saying that's not possible if you read the Quran holistically. If you read the Quran as one text, as one uniform text, it is not possible to interpret that verse in that way. Also, another point I wanted to raise was chapter 2, again, reading the Quran as a uniform text. Fight in the way. Chapter 2, verse 190. Fight in the way of Allah against those who fight against you. But begin not hostilities, so you should not be the ones to begin hostilities. Allah loves not aggressors. And slay them wherever you find them, and drive them out of the places from where they drove you out. For persecution is worse than slaughter. So if you're being persecuted, fight back. Don't just sit there and turn the other cheek, like Christianity, like the Christians believe, right? So,
like some Christians believe.
Like some, and fight not with them at the inviolable places of worship until they first attack you there. So if they attack you, see, when you read the Quran, it's all about if they attack you, if they attack you, if they attack you, then fight back. Okay?
No one's
and don't, So again, okay, this means in a state of war, and only the governments can decide. Tom, Dicks, and Harrys walking on the street, individual Muslims cannot apply these verses on the masses at large.
So there are a couple of points I wish to make. Thank you. A couple of points I wish to make. One is about, at some point, maybe later on, I'd like to ask you, if we were just interpreting this verse on its own, do you see my point about the religious language? But first of all, before we go there, I want to say, historically, have Muslim, jurists, legal schools, etc., interpreted these verses to whatever that was, 185, whatever it was, and 68. Have they interpreted those verses in the light of being abrogated by 929? From what I understand, many in the Islamic legal tradition have considered 929 the sword verse, a very late verse, to overwrite these other verses.
No doubt.
Okay,
You're absolutely.
So why should Muslims today?
The Shafi school of thought, in particular, you're absolutely correct. You're right. Okay, the Shafi school of thought is known as the hawkish school of thought in that sense.
Just the
Shafis. The Hanbalis, the Hanafis, and the Malikis, which are the overwhelming majority of the Muslims. So the Shafis. Who are the Shafis? Who are we talking about? We're talking about not even 5% of Muslims today. Okay, Shafis are mainly in Yemen, in Somalia, and some parts of India, and that's pretty much it. Where else? Indonesia and Malaysia, the most peaceful Muslims on the planet. Yeah. So the most passive Muslim on the planet, Indonesian and Malaysians, and amazingly, no army was sent to them. So Shafi school of thought, some of the jurists from the Shafi school of thought had argued like that this verse means war by default with non-Muslims. War by default.
But that's a minority perspective in Islam.
And that perspective was never accepted as the norm. It was never upheld by Muslim scholars and Muslim governments, historically speaking. Okay, this is why we see so little example of Muslims attacking other nations unprovoked. Okay, there may be examples. Some people might have followed occasionally the Shafi view, but that view is actually not accepted. It is a view. It is there. It is based upon this very verse. You're not wrong in pointing that out. But the majority of the Muslims don't follow that view. Likewise, there are other views, erroneous ideas in Islamic literature. Some people have expressed certain views. They are not accepted. majority of the scholars come out and condemn.
Great. So
Sorry,
that's fine.
sorry guys, we're gonna move. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you want to get closer to your problem? I understand.
Someone's smoking something.
Like I said, is that what you're trying to get close to?
No.
Yeah, it'll enhance our debate.
Yeah.
So that's fair enough. I wasn't aware of that. I hadn't heard that before.
Yeah, that's true.
I need to go away research that, and if you are correct, then fair enough.
No, you are absolutely right. There are certain people who did interpret the verse like that but then others have come in and refuted them in the light of the Quran and the prophetic tradition that your idea, your view is wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
That view, which was there in the Shafi school, was that kind of dominant in the Shafi school, or is that a minority within the Shafi school?
That's a good question. I think even in the Shafi school is a minority view.
Okay.
Yeah, because we know for a fact that we know for a fact that Egypt, for example, was at one time Shafi. Okay, and some of the rulers in Egypt were also Shafi. Okay, Sultan Saladin was Shafi. Okay, you don't see that behavior in his life. If you read the life of Salahuddin, okay, and he was not an unlearned Shafi. He was a very learned Shafi. He had scholars around him advising him on a daily basis. So we don't see that behavior even in the Shafis. Okay, it's a minority view within the Shafi school of thought.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I need to go away do my homework and find out more about that. The other question that I had was, so let's assume you're correct. Given that we interpret 929 in the light of the rest of the Quran, and that you shouldn't fight people just for their religion, given that is the case, why does 929 seem to be so religiously oriented? Why does 929 seem to, from my perspective, jar with the overall portrayal of the Quran when it comes to fighting people for their religion?
Because that's the most prominent verse on war in the Quran. So that's why it stands out in the Quran.
So you're saying, but that exacerbates the problem. Why is the most prominent verse on violence in the Quran, which looks like it's about fighting people for their religion, to me and to many, why is that there, looking that way, when actually the rest of the Quran tells us that's not what that verse means?
Do you know the Quran also commands to fight the Muslims as well? Do you know about that?
The Munafiqun? I don't know.
Munafiqun are
I'm
not
not sure which
Muslims.
verse you're referring to.
The verse where the Quran states that when two groups of believers fight each other, then try to make up between them. And the one who is the aggressor, and if they don't want to make up, one of them doesn't want to make up, then fight against the aggressor, even though they are Muslims.
That's fine.
Okay, so violence is not in the Quran. If you want to say violence or fighting is only towards the non-believers or disbelievers, according to the Quran, that would be a mistake. Because in the Quran we have these verses which are categorically commanding to fight Muslims.
Yeah, but in that
when they commit crimes, fight them.
Great. But in that passage it is very clear, because obviously, we see in the Quran you're not supposed to fight Muslims for being Muslims, that's very clear.
Yeah.
And in those passages it is very clear that you fight them because they're aggressing against the other Muslim party. What I'm saying is,
in this verse it says that fight them because they are not Muslims.
That's what it sounds like, yeah.
Right. No, but then
because that verse is not saying fight them because they're Muslims.
If you read this verse on its own, no doubt you would walk away with that conclusion, no doubt.
I'm saying,
but if you read the Quran as a uniform text, you would never come up with that conclusion.
But my question is still, and it's not just one verse. It seems to be a few verses in this context.
Yeah.
If it is the case that you don't fight people for their religious beliefs, why does this verse, especially in Allah's,
Romans.
Sorry.
Romans.
Okay, but
you see, we don't read the Quran.
So much clearer.
Sorry.
Couldn't God have made it so much clearer?
Who was
as in, it would be so easy for, and I know this knife cuts both ways. You've got to be careful.
I'll give you an example. Yeah. Why is this verse not dealing with the Jews? Although it says people of the book, right?
Okay, it is the Jews.
No, the Jews are there.
In 930. So 929, fight against such of those who have been given the scripture, as believe not in Allah nor the last day, and forbid not that which Allah has forbidden by his messenger, and follow not the religion of truth until they pay the tribute readily being brought low. And the Jews say, Ezra is the son of Allah. And then 31, they have taken as lords beside Allah their rabbis. So this verse is talking about Jews as well as Christians.
And Christians, yes.
Both.
Yes. But amazingly,
which actually makes me wonder if it's not the Roman Empire. If the Roman Empire,
No, it is the Roman Empire. How do we know this? Because Jews were had a treaty with Muslims.
Which
At this time.
Sorry.
At this time,
Okay.
there were Jewish tribes
Okay.
who were in peace with Muslims.
Okay.
They had a treaty with Muslims
Okay.
around Medina.
Okay.
You know about this, right?
I know there were different Jewish tribes.
Okay.
Some had
Okay.
treaties, yeah.
Now, they were not attacked.
Okay.
Okay. So what is the verse talking about? If the Jews are not the point, if they're not the reference of this verse, so who's being attacked? Okay. So we know from the prophetic tradition. First of all, when was this verse revealed? It was revealed. It was revealed in the final year of the Prophet's life, in the year 9. Okay. Sorry, no, not year 9. Year 9 or 10. Before, few months before he passed away. Okay. And the imminent threat at that time was the Roman threat.
I get it. So,
And it has been clarified in the prophetic tradition as well.
okay. So we talked about this earlier. Let's say I accept all of the stuff about the background, history, the context. Fine, accept all of that for the point of this discussion. I'm still not clear why Allah didn't just say in Surah 9, fight those who are a threat to you, fight the treaty breakers, etc., as it does earlier on in Surah 9.
Yeah.
Why does it have to say fight those who do not believe, those who takes their rabbis and monks as lords? Why does it have to use such religious language?
Because Romans were fighting them for their religion. That's why. Because the Romans,
okay.
you see, the Romans were coming with that attitude. They were fighting Muslims because they were Muslims.
So it's a rhetorical thing. It's saying you Romans are attacking us
For religion?
For our religion. Let's turn it back on its head.
Yes, you can say that. You can say that because the Romans had made it very clear. They had made it very clear that it is about religion. How do we know that? Because the messenger of the Prophet was killed by one of the allies. Okay, and when the Muslims went to avenge his murder, and it was illegal to kill messengers even at that time.
Yes.
Okay, how do we know this? 2 Persian messengers came to the Prophet, and their beards were shaved and their moustache, the moustaches were big, long.
Okay.
And the Prophet said, if it was allowed to kill messengers, I would have killed you too.
Okay.
Because he hated the face. They looked very ugly to him. So because it's not allowed to kill messengers, I wouldn't do that. Okay. So even at that time, these rules were there. So they killed one of the messengers of the Prophet because he was a Muslim. Okay. He was taking a message of Islam to the king of the Romans.
That's fine. So let's say I accept all of this cultural background. Now I do think the context, let's say it is that the Romans are attacking them for their religion.
Yeah.
Even so, a non-Muslim can very easily say that religious persecution prompted the Muslims to start their own religious persecution to fight them back for their religion. I know that you're not saying that, and you can just say it's just rhetorical. It's taking those themes and turning them back on their head.
I'm not saying it's rhetorical. I'm saying it's actual. I'm saying it's actual. The Romans were attacking Muslims for their religion.
Okay.
The Quran says just like that they're attacking you for their religion.
Okay.
You can attack them because they are not of your religion. Simple as that. They are attacking you because you have Islam.
So you do fight them for their religion, but only when they fight you first.
Yes. That's the bottom line. The bottom line is Muslims cannot start the hostilities.
Okay.
They cannot start the hostilities. They have to live in peace. They have to promote peace. Okay. Quran is full of verses like that. Okay. So you have to read the Quran as a uniform text. Once you do that, you come to realize that Islam in no way, under no circumstances, promote indiscriminate violence or unprovoked violence. It doesn't promote that. In fact, those who did that in the life of the Prophet, he rebuked them. He rebuked them. One of his companions,
Tell him to send an umbrella.
one of his companions who had killed some of the people, the Prophet refused to give him refuge. He refused to give him refuge. He says, you're not my problem. Go away.
So
Go away.
so I think we've got to a position where
Another example, sorry. When the Muslims are going to conquer Mecca, one of his companions, he ran towards Mecca with the flag. He said, today is the day of slaughter. We will slaughter these Meccans. Who are the Meccans? Same people who have been killing the Prophet, Prophet's companions, his uncles, his relatives, everyone. And the Prophet said to his companions, hold him, bring him back. They went, they captured him, then brought him back, and the Prophet took the flag away from him. But today is the day of mercy. It's not the day of slaughter.
fine.
So that's the example we learn from the Prophet. Okay, he was a practical man, following the teachings of Islam practically. Someone's trying to. Who is this? Who is this? Reporting to police, man. Who is this? Who was that? Who is this guy? So, hold this. No, it's going to tell him to go somewhere else. Yeah. So the bottom line is, under no circumstances, we can interpret the verse to somehow substantiate indiscriminate violence against non-Muslims. Okay, so it cannot be interpreted in that way for a number of reasons. Number one, our theology is against that. Our theological sources, our literature is full of ideas that go directly against such notions. Number one. Number two, our history testifies to the fact that the Muslims, when it came to Jews and Christians, they treated them with utmost mercy, justice, and compassion.
So let's say I accept all that. I think we've got to a point with 929 where we're saying you fight them for their religion because they fought you first.
Because they fought you for your religion.
Fine, because they fought you for your religion. But
verse 68 says the same thing.
Sure. It is quite a confusing thing that could very easily be mistaken for simply fight them for their religion, which is how many. Which is how many have interpreted 929. Would it not have been a lot clearer for Allah to skip that second stage of fight them for their religion and just stick to the primary reason, which is fight them because they fought you for your religion? Wouldn't that have avoided a whole amount of ambiguity?
I can say the same thing about the Bible. You're a Christian.
Okay.
Yeah. And I can ask the same question. That's a fair response.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. No, but why didn't God put down clearly, or Jesus said clearly, I'm God?
Okay.
All he had to say was one sentence.
Sure.
He had the time to rebuke the Pharisees and Sadducees and rebuke the tree, all of that, but he couldn't say I'm God in one sentence.
Sure.
But I'm not going to say that. I can argue like that, but I'm not going to argue like that. What I'm saying is that interpretation carries no weight Quranically, because chapter 60 verse 8 clarifies that it is because of the religion. Okay. It is because of the religion. So it complements the verse 920, Surah 9 verse 29. It complements that. How? Because even chapter 60 verse 8, what does it state? It states, if they fight you not for your religion.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same subject.
Sure.
It's exactly the same subject. Sure.
Yeah. Assuming the Sharpies aren't correct in saying that that's been abrogated. But yes, as you say, that's not the mainstream interpretation. Okay, that's fine. And you make a very good point. If I'm going to talk about God making it clear, you're right. You've got to apply that to the Bible too. In terms of that argument, why didn't God make it clearer? There's a limited value to it.
I think it's clear enough.
Okay. I'd say
for me, because I know the context, I've read the commentaries, I've seen the prophetic tradition and the behavior of the Prophet himself in the light of these verses. What did the Prophet do? What did his successors do? The people who took the Quran directly from him, how did they actually understand this verse? How did they understand it? Now, they understood it exactly the way I understand it.
Sure, with your interpretation of Islamic history, obviously people differ on that, and they're entitled to. So I just want to clarify for the camera, for you as well. Got to be consistent. That argument can be made against the Bible as well. The point you made about you think it's sufficiently clear, I think the Gospels are sufficiently clear about Jesus being God as well.
Yeah.
So it's not a watertight argument. It's got to be weighed up against many other factors.
No, but it is.
So for me, I've got to weigh up what I think is the ambiguity of 929 in what you're saying. I've got to weigh that up against the other points you make about the other verses in the Quran, about Islamic history. For you, it's very convincing to say that. Islam does not condone violence for religious reasons. For me, it's less convincing, because I'm less convinced about what Islamic history has to say in the matter. I'm less convinced about the matter of abrogation. But I think I need to go do my homework on that.
What are you less convinced about?
That.
What is the conviction of?
So, when I have studied it in the past, the position about 9.5, 9.29 abrogating 68, I had thought that my impression, both from reading a popular apologist, also from reading one or two academic sources, secondary literature. My impression had been that it was much more widespread than the Shafi school. So I can't continue that discussion until I go and do my homework to see the truth of that matter.
Yeah.
You talk about scenarios where the Muslims were merciful towards non-Muslims, both within their polity and without.
Yeah.
I've seen cases brought to me where the opposite is true. So,
Such as.
So I mean, fighting the Jewish tribes, there's then a question of were they betraying them, were they not? I've heard it been disputed whether the Romans actually were a military threat to Islam. I'm not claiming that the non-Muslims are true in these assertions.
Well, which history are
all I know is they're contested. So I'm not.
Who contested these ideas? The
sometimes
Romans were a threat to
popular
Muslims.
apologists, sometimes academic sources.
Such as?
So one source I've read that's been quite influential on me has been David Cook, Understanding Jihad. He's written about a lot of these issues.
David Cook.
Yeah,
Okay.
Understanding Jihad, University of California Press.
Okay.
He seems to think that the Islamic tradition on the whole has been more militaristic than the kind of narrative you're portraying.
He's right about that.
Okay.
And we don't deny that historically. Islamic tradition has been militaristic. Muslim states had been garrison states because they were continuously in a form of conflict with other nations.
Okay.
Not because they were causing conflict, other nations were attacking them.
I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I think that David Cook is saying actually
Like
it's more aggressive. It's not just being defensive. It's about attacking for the sake of Islam.
So in some cases it was preemptive aggression.
Okay, I think
For
he's
example,
saying,
in the case of Ottomans,
Fine.
sometimes they went out of the way.
I think his work is going not just talking about preemptive. It's talking about attacking to spread Islam.
Okay.
He could be wrong. I
Right.
don't know much about this issue.
So then, in that case, Richard,
I don't have a strong position until I study. Yes.
Right, but I'm trying to look into his argument and rebut it, present a rebuttal. In that case, having a treaty with non-Muslim nations doesn't make sense, right? If that's the case, if it's all-out war, if it's all-out militancy, and if it's all-out conflict, then there is no point in making treaties with non-Muslims.
So from what I understand,
And which the Muslims did historically, throughout.
Sure.
Yeah.
So from what I understand from Cook, and I've possibly read one or two other academics on this, I can't remember, it's been months since I read this, is that first of all, Muslims didn't always have the exact same policy. I think that the point is often there was this aggressive interpretation of the Quran and spreading violence, spreading religious
In
violence.
the times of war, you're absolutely right.
But
I'm complimenting
the
your point.
treaties.
During the Crusades, that's what happened.
Okay. But to do with the treaties, what these authors are saying is Islamic legal theory allowed for times of peace, it allowed for treaties, it allowed for times of non-expansion when the Muslim state needed to consolidate, when it wasn't ready for fighting. As long as it was in the long-term interests of Islam, you can have treaties. So treaties don't disprove this theory.
Yes.
But I
agree.
haven't
I
proved the
agree.
theory either. I've got to go study it more.
Yeah.
Obviously, you take a very different perspective.
Yeah.
All I was able to talk about was Surah 9, my interpretation
No,
of it.
my view is that Islam throughout its history, Muslim dynasties, Muslim rulers, generally speaking, their behavior towards non-Muslims has been very positive. Generally, okay, there are cases where non-Muslims were mistreated by individual rulers, and even in those cases, Muslims stood up to the Muslim ruler to defend the non-Muslims. So we have many examples. This is why we are proud of our history. It's not because of scientific advancement the Muslims achieved. It's also because of the behavior. The golden age of the Jews in Spain, even in Baghdad, even in Damascus, even in India. You name it. I mean, do you concede to the fact that Muslims, in comparison to other civilizations, were a lot more gentle, a lot more merciful and tolerant towards the other? When we look at, in comparison to other civilizations.
So, I mean, towards the other, that's a broader topic that brings in, Hindus, Buddhists, etc. Let's park that for now and just talk about the Jews, which is what you started with. I think that is, I don't know, I think that is the mainstream academic understanding that the Muslim world treated Jews better than the Christian world did. I know there are one or two recent books that have disputed that. I don't know.
Such as which
I'm
book?
not an expert. Off the top of my head, I can't remember. I can find out for you. Either I can try Google now, or
because I am no, Mark Cohen has written this book on this issue.
What's it called?
The Crescent. something, the crescent and the cross. It's to do with Jews under the crescent and the cross. Okay, Jews under the crescent and the cross. And then Bernard Lewis has written his Jews of Islam, and there are other historians such as Zion Zohar, people who have written. His book is called History of Sephardic and Mizrahi Jewry. These people have argued that no doubt that the Muslims treated the Jews for over 1,000 years with utmost compassion and tolerance. In fact, the Jews flourished more so than the Muslims in some cases.
So I mean, I'd have to look into that. I simply don't know.
And even Christians, it goes for the Christians as well.
Yeah, and I will accept that. You know, I am ashamed of how Christians in the past have treated Jews. I'm not saying always, I don't know, but there have been times when Christians have treated Jews very badly, and that's awful, yes.
But do you accept my claim that Islamic civilization, Muslim civilization, in comparison to other civilizations, treated the other with a lot more compassion and tolerance?
So with Jews, I don't know. The other, in terms of Hindus and Buddhists, mostly I don't know. I've heard that they killed a lot of Hindus in India. I don't know if that's true.
Where did you hear this?
Again, both popular and I think academic.
You know this is disputed. Heavily disputed.
No, sure.
How is it disputed?
All of these topics are disputed.
Yeah, even on Hindus, those who claim that
some say they're people of the book. I know that therefore they were accorded respect.
No. When people claim that Hindus were killed by Muslims during the early invasions, in hundreds of thousands, these are lies. In fact, people like Richard Eaton, who is a specialist on India, and other academics. There is another lady now, Audrey Trush. She has written recently a book on Aurangzeb, the Mughal emperor, who is the most tarnished, the most maligned Mughal emperor, because he was the most Islamic, unfortunately. Not unfortunately because of Islamic, unfortunately because he's maligned. So he is, a lot of modern academics are coming out and saying all of this is Indian nationalist narrative, right-wing nationalist narrative, just like we have, bigots, Islam haters there, EDL and Britain First, people like that. You're not going to take your history from people like that. So as far as historians are concerned, they are unanimous that the Muslims did in India what was politically necessary, like other Hindu kings did. So when there were temple desecrations, they were for political reasons, because temples were seen as symbols of power. So temples were not desecrated because of religious reasons. Rather, the kings who were fighting Muslim kings were taking refuge in temples and using them as symbols of power. So they had to be demolished. And other Hindu kings were invading Hindu territories and doing the same thing. So one Hindu king, for example, worshipped a particular deity, and he invades another territory, and that territory or the people there worship another deity. So he would go straight to the temple and destroy the temple to basically subdue the masses. Your God is dead.
I told you I need that umbrella.
Your God couldn't protect you. So it's over. So it was one of those things. But when it comes to, I invite you to look into this question.
If I get time, I will.
Whether the Muslim civilization or Islamic civilization, in comparison to other civilizations, I'm talking about Romans, Greeks, Egyptians, even Christians throughout the Middle Ages, and even to this day. I'm claiming that even secular states today in the West are not treating the Muslims in the way Muslims treated Jews and Christians. Bernard Lewis has a very interesting lecture online where he talks about this. He goes, the Muslims treated the Jews with a lot of tolerance, and if they request similar tolerance today from modern secular states, they should be granted it. So he made this point recently. So looking at Islamic civilization, Muslim civilization in general, the behavior of Muslims towards the other has been very positive, generally speaking, not in every single case. I know there are exceptions to the rule, but the rule has been that Muslims are generally tolerant to Jews, Christians, and Hindus. In fact, there are books written on this topic. The Hindus flourished under the rule of Islam in India. And in fact, the Sanskrit language, it took off once again. The renaissance of the Sanskrit language took place under the Mughals. So if this is the case, then Muslims are the last people on the planet to be accused of instigating terror, instigating indiscriminate killing or mass murder or genocide even. We, as far as our track record is concerned, we are at the bottom of the list when it comes to crimes. when it comes to crimes, I think we are nearly.
I think we're kind of wrapping up, really.
I've lost my energy. Wow.
So I think the stuff you're talking about now, I don't know. I've got to go.
I want to discuss this question with you.
Okay.
This very question in the future when we have time. The Muslim civilization, what we call the fruit of Islam.
Okay.
You know, it is said in the Bible that you should know the
Judge a tree by its fruit.
Yes, thank you. So, if we do a comparison between Islam and Christianity, does Christianity stand a chance? Historically.
We'd have to look into that. I'm not a historian. If you want to debate on that topic, which is a very worthwhile debate, I'm the wrong person.
No, I'm not debating. I mean, have a discussion.
If you want a discussion,
I can never have a debate with you. You're a gentleman.
If you want a discussion on that, again, I'm the wrong person. My general history knowledge isn't fantastic.
Yeah, but generally speaking, what I have learned so far from my little study, that in comparison to Christian civilization, what we call Christendom and Muslim civilization, there is no comparison. In when it comes to treatment of the other. Okay?
Yeah, so I will concede, Christendom has treated the other very badly at many points in its history, and that's an awful thing. That's what I do know. Beyond that, I don't know much.
No, my point is not that exceptions, this was an exception in Christian history. This was the norm.
Maybe.
This was the norm. Kings, or monarchs, or even dynasties throughout Christian history, in particular Jews.
Okay.
Jews in particular were treated very, very badly.
Well, I'll have to look into that.
Yeah.
You might be tired, you might want to leave it there. I was going to ask you to finish your quotation earlier from Ibn Kathir.
Yeah.
Or we can leave that for another day.
Yeah, I can read it in Arabic.
I was curious to know the context which...
Does anyone
was
have
left
Ibn
out.
Kathir on his phone? The tafsir. Ibn Kathir. If you bring out Ibn Kathir, we will read, and Ibn Kathir will mention these very reports. We're talking about that Romans were threatening Muslims.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you have it in Arabic or English? English is abridged. Unfortunately, it's not complete.
Yeah?
Yeah. The English translation is abridged. Okay, let me see English what he's saying. Yeah. Do you have it? Now, how am I going to find chapter 9, verse 29?
Yeah, say search.
Is that 929?
Search. 929.
929.
Just find it for you.
Yeah. The problem is it's abridged. Because when you actually go to the complete text, it clearly categorically mentions all the reports to contextualize the circumstances why this verse was revealed. You know about Asbab al-Nuzul, right?
Yeah.
The reasons for revelation. So the Quran cannot be understood. Certain parts of the Quran cannot be understood without the reason for revelation. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense. So those verses that do have reasons for revelation that we can ascertain, we have to take it seriously. The reason of revelation. Yeah.
Which one is it again? Zoom in. You got it. Which one is it? 920.
Man, there's hardly any commentary on that.
929. 929. Yeah. See, slide along. Maybe it's further on. Change it.
So how do you... Is that Ibn Kathir?
929.
Ibn Kathir?
Oh, is that
No.
verse?
I need the
No, it
tafsir.
is Ibn Kathir. Tafsir.
How come you've got 3 mics, I've only got 1? That's not fair.
Because
No, I'm
they
joking,
they can hear you clearly. Because we're standing close to each other. You can have them if you
I'm
want.
kidding.
ولا يحزنك الذين يسارعون في الكفر. What's the difference tafsir?
No, man, this is abridged.
And this is the Arabic version of Abdul Hamid.
The Arabic. You got the English or Arabic?
28.
That's the problem. It's abridged, man. How do we go further?
Just slide with your hands. Slide. Other way. He wants the Arabic.
No, this is no good. This is abridged. We want the...
I know it.
the Arabic, complete Arabic, so that we can read exactly what, where he mentions that it's about the Romans were about to attack the Muslims. And yeah.
Is it online or can go online finding?
It's a bit of a mission to find it. It's there. It's definitely there. It's definitely there online, 100%. Actually, wait. There is. The expedition of Tabuk was preceded by the Battle of Muta, which began when the emissary of the Prophet was assassinated while delivering a letter to Roman ally. Ibn Qayyim writes, the cause of the battle was that the Messenger of Allah, peace be upon him, sent Harith bin Umair Azdi of the tribe of Lihb with his letter to Syria for the Roman king of Bursa. He presented it to Shirahbil ibn Amr al-Ghassani, the leader of the bordering tribes, okay, and he bound him and struck his neck. It killed him. Never had an ambassador of the Messenger of Allah been killed besides him. The Prophet was upset by that when the news reached him, and he dispatched an expedition.
Sorry, who was the source?
Zadul Ma'ad, Ibn Qayyim.
Sorry, who's he? I don't know him.
Ibn Qayyim is just like Ibn Kathir. Ibn Qayyim and Ibn Kathir were both students of Ibn Taymiyyah. You know Ibn Taymiyyah, right?
Taymiyyah.
Yeah.
So he's kind of a well-respected source.
Yeah.
Most Muslims would accept the source.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, fair enough.
Sealed lecture. This was the first act of Roman aggression that further led to the expedition of Tabuk, concerning which the verse 19 was revealed. Okay, so this is why if you read the Quran like Christians read the Bible, without background study, because most Christians do not have something like a prophetic tradition to explain the Bible. Okay, because the Bible itself is the tradition. You see my point?
Yes.
The New Testament.
We do appreciate context, though.
Yeah, of course. But with us, you see, we have this prophetic tradition, the background explaining as to why this verse was revealed. So when you see the background, it is impossible to apply the verse indiscriminately.
Sure. Now that there's a lot of.
You might not understand why I'm doing this, Adnan, but just trust me on this.
Yeah,
I'm going to
please.
quote Jonathan Brown's book, recent book called Misquoting Muhammad. He discusses all the peaceful verses, so to speak, in the Quran, and he says about the ulama, the Muslim scholars later on in the medieval period, he says, in a rare instance of agreement, the classical ulama declared all these verses, along with their clear principles of proportionality and non-aggression, to be abrogated by the sword verses. The moniker for the few decontextualizes segments of the Quranic verses suggesting unrestricted offensive war, such as fighting has been ordained for you and slay the polytheists wherever you find them. In all, a total of 124 Quranic verses were considered abrogated by the sword verses. And it goes on. So the contextualized argument makes sense.
No, it's not Arabic.
Adnan is saying, but the issue that some people bring up is that during the medieval ulama,
we can discuss
abrogated all of those peaceful verses in favour of the so-called sword verses. Not they ever mentioned the sword, but and that is arguably what some extremists are doing today. They're drawing on that. They're saying all the peaceful verses, yes, I can do this, are abrogated, and so that can
because we were discussing that earlier.
Abrogation is no doubt a highly contentious issue within the Islamic literature. There is no consensus of the scholars as to how many verses have been abrogated. Right? Some say 5, others say 20, some say even 50. Okay, so we don't know the exact number. Abrogation is a claim some scholars make that this verse has abrogated such and such verse. Okay, but that idea or that opinion is not necessarily accepted by all other scholars.
That quote. I'm sorry. Could you read that quote once more?
Could you repeat it?
If that's okay. So I thought that quote was suggesting there was quite a lot of scholars.
I'm carrying this.
A lot more than 50,
So that's Brown, right? Jonathan Brown.
Yes, I'm just quoting from him because he's an Islamic scholar. Therefore,
misquoting Muhammad, right?
Yes. He's not intentionally misquoting Muhammad. That's just the name of the book.
No,
That's
like
not
misquoting Jesus.
That's not.
Have you read it?
I've read a lot of it. I can't remember if I finished it.
He's a really good friend of mine. He's a great guy. Met him. Absolutely
Bart,
amazing.
as you probably call him. Okay. This is page 102. Misquoting Muhammad. Now, a bit before that, he's quoting all those. he's quoting all those verses which do speak of peaceful non-aggression and so on and so on. And then he goes on to say, on page 102, in a rare instance of agreement, the classical ulama declared all these verses, along with their clear principles of proportionality and non-aggression, to be abrogated by the sword verses, in inverted commas, the moniker for the few decontextualized segments of the Quranic verses suggesting unrestricted offensive warfare, such as fighting has been ordained for you, Surah 2:216, and slay the polytheists wherever you find them, 9:5. In all, a total of 124 Quranic verses were considered abrogated by the sword verses. Jihad for the expansion of the abode of Islam thus became a collective duty for the Muslim polity according to all Sunni schools of law. Leading medieval jurists ruled that the caliphs must undertake jihad at least once a year against the most proximate foe, based on analogy of the annual collection of the jizya poll tax from non-Muslim subjects. Though the Prophet's treaties with the Meccans meant that extended truces were allowed. And he goes on to say other things about no compulsion of religion, that prophetic saying, that Quranic saying actually not being abrogated. So there was never any compulsion in religion.
Because that sounds. So earlier you were saying this understanding of kind of warfare for the sake of, religious reasons, etc. That was a Shafi interpretation, and actually perhaps a minority. That sounds like it was pretty universal.
No, it's not. I'm
Could you interpret
100%
that
sure.
quote for me?
I agree with Adnan on this, because people like Ibn Taymiyyah, I mean, doubtless Adnan knows him better than I, but and other people, the Hanbali school, at the very least, did not view jihad only for defensive reasons, not for aggressive reasons. And it's Shafi himself, I think, the founder of the Shafi school, who may well have agreed with the expansionist view.
Yeah, the hawkish, what we call the hawkish
the hawks,
view.
if you like. The other schools, the Hanafi, the Hanbali, and the Maliki, didn't accept that. And even in the Shafi school, which is not, it's not like the Shafi school isn't a mouthpiece for one bloke.
Yeah, exactly.
Called Shafi,
There's
who
a number
lives.
of different Jews.
It actually contains a school of thought, and the consensus today, or has been ever since, in the Shafi school, amongst Shafi scholars, is that they don't agree with Shafi himself.
Okay.
So I think
So it's a minority view within the Shafi
So
school.
I might be misinterpreting that quote, but I thought that quote was saying that it was the kind of
every single
unanimous
school
view.
agrees with the progressive or offensive jihad.
Offensive, which I thought contradicted what you were saying earlier.
No, what Brown is saying, that all Islamic schools agree that when it's time for conflict, you have to go to. I mean, for example, if the enemy attacks you, they're all unanimous that you have to defend yourself. Okay, he's not necessarily speaking about that offensive jihad is a policy of all four schools. No, that's not true.
I think
that would be
the way I
historically
understand it is
incorrect.
to understand the context, the historical context of that day.
Whose mic is this? Sorry, this.
When we didn't have nation states, there weren't the United Nations, didn't have international law, where basically you had powers that either ate you or you ate them. Conflict was part of the order of things today. And so offensive jihad was part of the offensive jihad of Christendom as well, where you got obviously Christendom was a very offensive jihadi as well.
That may well be true.
So that is the context of that day. In today's world, with nation states and international agreements, and so on, that's no longer applicable. That understanding of the law is different, I would argue, today, where you have nation states and you have international treaties and so on. But also, the important point is the Prophet himself has always been recognised, had treaties, short or long-term treaties. It's not that this jihad is always universal and limited. You have treaties with people; they can be last for different periods of time.
I may have misheard that first. Maybe I should actually look at the verse so I can actually.
Which verse?
Sorry, the quote.
The quote.
Sorry, 'cause
Do you have the book at home?
I do have it. I've got it on my Kindle. I don't put it down.
No, he does appear to be saying.
Do you know what the
He does appear
Kindle
to be saying that
location
it's the policy of the four schools.
Page 102. But read
Read
the
the Kindle.
Could
I have a look once more?
And
I've also
You can take a snap of it. You can take a picture.
The point is, to be fair to Jonathan Brown, Dr. G can take what he's saying. You need to read the paragraphs before and after.
Yeah.
There's other things he says as well, which I'm not reading out, which I could do, but I'm not
Have
here
you
to
got
read
the
out
book?
Jonathan's
Have you got
book.
the book?
I do, yes. I don't have it downloaded currently.
No, have you got the hard copy?
Not the hard copy, no, I've got the Kindle. that quote?
So it starts with a
In a rare instance of aggression, of agreement, sorry, the classical ulama declared all these verses
In a
along with
rare
their-
instance of agreement with who?
amongst themselves. They agree with agreement amongst themselves.
All these verses,
We'll come back to it.
along with their clear principles of proportionality and non-aggression, to be abrogated by the sword verses. What you were telling me earlier, you were quoting verses of non-aggression like 68.
Yes.
This
And
seems to be saying
I told you this view does exist.
Okay,
It does
but
exist.
this seems to say, in a rare instance of agreement, the classical ulama, this was widespread, this was...
But that was then. It's not.
That's fine.
We're not held.
معنا نهج حياة جئنا تبصرة عن كل ضلال أعددنا بضع رسالات تحمل نورا للأجيال معنا نهج حياة جئنا تبصرة عن كل ضلال